Jerry Ashton here with 15 Minutes of Fact, and happy to tell you that I met our next guest here on 15 Minutes of Fact, Alicia Godsberg, at an event here in New York City this past June called No Nukes. She introduced me to a person, which I then featured in this program in an earlier interview, Leslie Kagan, herself a noted New York City activist who at that moment was a lead organizer helping with a march against the infamous Stop and Frisk program that was very active here. That march had the intended effect, and Stop and Frisk dropped by a good percentage. Now, Alicia, who's the executive director of Peace Action here in New York State since the fall of 2010, is another of those people who would be called an instigator. Others might call her a hero. But in any case, someone who causes a large number of people to take action in cases of wrongs and injustices. So rather than reciting her impressive pedigree, I'm going to ask her to tell you more of her own background and her operations purpose and why she's appearing today on our program. So welcome to the show today, Alicia, and tell us about yourself.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Jerry. Well, as Jerry said, I'm the executive director of Peace Action New York State, which is the state chapter of the National Peace Action Organization, which has nationally over 100,000 members. And here in New York State, we have about 5,000 people that are working with us across the state, from Buffalo to Albany and New York City and everywhere in between. Our organization was founded from the merger of the SANE and nuclear freeze movements. So it started out as an anti-nuclear organization, but now we work on additionally issues of peace against the wars going on, and broadening out to a Move the Money campaign where we're working with social and economic justice groups to try and move the money away from wars and the military and towards funding our communities. And
well,
my personal back. Go ahead.
Before you go into that, let's talk a little bit about SANE, because people might not remember what those initials stood for.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's the Committee for Sane Nuclear Policy was the official name for it. The acronym SANE itself, I'm not really 100% sure what that stands for, but I know that it's the Committee for the Sane Nuclear Policy, which was started in the 50s during the beginning of the nuclear arms race.
Okay, so what we have here is a rich history of your organization starting out as anti-nuclear and has obviously blossomed since that time. You're a fresh face there compared to its history. So let us get an idea of your personal background and what brought you to Peace Action.
Sure. Well, I graduated in 2007 with a master's degree in political science. I'd taken some time off between my undergrad and grad degrees, but during graduate school I started working on international law issues with the Bush administration and nuclear weapons policy, and got very interested in doing that. So that's sort of what I wrote my thesis on, and I got an internship with the Lawyers Committee on Nuclear Policy here in New York City with a gentleman named John Burroughs, who's a well-known legal scholar in the field of nuclear disarmament. And from there, I got a job working in Washington, D.C. at the Federation of American Scientists as a research associate for the Strategic Security Program, and I started a UN Affairs part for the NPT Review Conference that happened here in New York in 2010. So, that position sort of lasted through the end of the NPT Review Conference, and then I started working here at Peace Action, and less of a community organizer than a nuclear disarmament policy person, but it's proved to be a great learning experience for me doing the organizing part as well, and I think it was a good combination, something that I definitely benefited from, and then maybe the organization also got something out of my disarmament background.
There's an immediate question I have on my mind, and that deals with another activist group that has become quite well known, and which is having its first birthday coming up on Monday, September 17, and that, of course, is Occupy Wall Street. So as someone who has experience in what it takes to organize and get attention, what is your assessment of Occupy's importance and place in history? Certainly, it doesn't have the rich history of peace action, but is it on the right track?
Well, that's a very complicated question. I definitely think that the Occupy movement has changed the game in that you have politicians, people running for president, the president himself, everybody across the political spectrum, and for that matter, anybody that's been watching a television or reading a newspaper in the past year knows what Occupy anything means now, and it's brought to the public consciousness the idea that not only are things fundamentally unsound in our economy, but that there's a good reason for it, and that reason needs to be addressed by the very people that kind of benefit from that inequality, and that it's going to take a large movement of people to break through that system and try to make some very important fundamental changes to our democracy in order to really live out the full potential of that democracy.
Well, the focus of Occupy is among many things, but the major one is following the money, and it's Occupy Wall Street and the 1%. How does that become or incorporate itself into peace action's focus?
Well, it's funny because here in New York City, where the Occupy Wall Street thing started, there's several committees that have formed. There's the Environmental Solidarity Committee, for instance, and other committees that have formed that have hundreds of people that go to their meetings every week. And we tried to, we still have it, but create a large anti-war committee, and it really kind of floundered. There were just a handful of us there every week, and basically the same people that I see at all other things. So it was very interesting that all this sort of anger about the 1%, the 99%, the money not being put into the right places was really, hyper-focused on the banks, which is understandable. But what we're trying to do in Peace Action is connect that idea to the fact that, look, there isn't really a financial crisis per se. In our country, there's a crisis of priorities and what people are spending the money on, and how this is a little bit different than the message about taxing the rich and money in the banks and all the faulty loans and the bubbles that have burst. But
it's a very important difference, I might point out, because if there's one major drain on our national budget, it's war. If you figure the cost of every tank that's built and every ship that's built and every missile that's launched takes away from so many social programs, my vote would be for more of occupiers to get involved with peace action. So let me ask you this. How can people connect with PANYS, P-A-N-Y-S? What is your website, and how can people reach you personally if you have an email?
Absolutely. We have a website. It's www.panys.org, PANYS for Peace Action New York State. And you can email me, if you email info@panys.org, that comes directly to me. And we're a very small operation here. It's myself, and I have a program assistant who does our field organizing, student organizing. So, you'll get one of us. You can find out our phone number and our address online. We're right down here in Lower Manhattan. You're welcome to come by the office, and we can talk about working together on all these things, especially the move the money stuff. And I would love to connect more with the Occupy movement about how military spending really does affect our economy and the 99%.
Well, you have something, a campaign that's called the Cost of War Awareness Campaign. Is that still on?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, tell me about us. Tell us about that.
This is exactly what I was just referring to. We have some tools for the campaign, like we have an electronic sign that has been traveling throughout the state that people program with different messages about the cost of war. And the cost of war is the financial cost and the human cost as well. It talks about, basically the campaign seeks to point out how much money, let's say, your individual congressional district is paying in taxes towards the Department of Defense, and what that type of money could buy for your community instead. And we get these numbers from the National Priorities Project, which you can find online as well. Nationalpriorities.org, I believe, is their website, and they have trade-off calculators that you can use to find out this information. We're trying to bring this very large and arcane concept of spending on nuclear weapons and spending on the military and bring it right down to the local level and show people that it really does have an effect on the federal dollars coming into your community, and the programs at your school and the closures at your library and the bus routes that are shut down and the public works projects that are put on hold, and all these programs that most Americans use and count on every day.
Well, speaking of programs, I believe your operation was involved in a protest in front of NBC that took place earlier this month in August. What was that about?
Yes, it's a program that NBC has been airing. I think it's been on for 3 weeks, and this coming Monday will be the last show. It's called Stars Earn Stripes. And what it does is it takes, it's a reality, quote-unquote, show that has celebrities paired up with ex-military and ex-law enforcement personnel, and they are competing for money for charities, but what they're doing is military-type exercises, even using live ammunition, and basically what they're doing is they're turning war into an athletic-type competition, a game. And we're out there in front of NBC with military families Speak Out and Veterans for Peace and the Granny Peace Brigade, and we're saying, look, war isn't a game. The 2,000 U.S. soldiers that have died in Iraq and Afghanistan, didn't die playing a game. This is very real. This is not entertainment, and it's shocking and appalling.
It is. It makes you wonder what sort of people could dream up a program which essentially glorifies war and then gets these poor luminaries involved with a promise that they will benefit a charity. Now, I would have suggested that we cut out the middleman called war and just give these stars money for their charities and stop this nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, it's outrageous to think that, that they claim, NBC claims that this is a show about honoring the troops, and we all say to them, if you want to honor the troops, why don't you air a program that shows how difficult it is for them when they return home, or for their families when they don't, and that it takes a veteran a year on average to even receive a confirmation letter from the Veterans Administration saying that they got their claim, not even to process their claim.
And what was their response to that simple request?
Well, there's a petition that's online that's got almost 50,000 signatures that you can access by going to starsearnstripes.org, which is a website that we set up, or I don't want to take credit for it, but the other organizations involved in the protest have set up, and they're going to, they've been presenting the petition signatures to NBC, and our hope is that they just don't, I mean, the episodes have been shot. The last episode, the 4th episode, will air on Monday. We just hope that the backlash has been such that they won't ever do anything like this again. I mean, they received a letter from 9 Nobel Peace Laureates, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu, saying that this is an abomination and a disrespect to the thousands of people that die from armed violence, all over the world every month.
Well, let's move to another campaign that's very, very important, which actually serves as a mechanism that will satisfy both Occupy Wall Street as well as PANAS, and that's a program or a campaign called Move the Money. Could you tell me what your relationship is and your familiarity is with that?
Yeah, the Move the Money campaign is something that Peace Action National was in on the ground floor of, and working with the New Priorities Network, which is a coalition of social and economic justice groups, labor unions, immigrant rights groups, basically broadening out from the typical peace and anti-war groups, saying, talking about basically what the Cost of War Awareness Project talks about, but this is a much more broad-based coalition-building kind of thing, and we're taking our cost of war awareness issues and relating them to other groups that may not have, taken. They have their own pressing issues. Let's say if it's an immigrant rights group, for instance. But if we can talk to them about how military spending affects even their situation, then we've sort of broadened our base and we amplify our voices and we can lift this issue up. We can help them with their issues. They can help us with our issues and relate all the lack of federal funding for programs that benefit their communities to this wasteful and unnecessary spending on nuclear weapons and wars and the military, ever reaching for the next most lethal weapon out there.
If I remember, Peace Action was responsible in some part, maybe well back in the 50s, for one of the largest marches that ever occurred in the United States. Do you know the history of that?
Yes. The largest anti-nuclear protest was, to that date in the United States was on June 12th, 1982. And there were over 1 million people that marched to Central Park in protest of the nuclear arms race and for peace. There was a big rally that was held there, and I believe you spoke to Leslie Kagan about that. You mentioned in an earlier show she was one of the organizers and very much involved with Peace Action as well. So, Peace Action was involved in that, and that's the event that we had where we met was the 30th anniversary of that event, which was a big day. It actually helped to propel the anti-nuclear movement towards some successes, so it was great.
Quite a few successes.
It ended the MX missile program, for example, which was going to be deployed in Europe, and that sort of came to a halt after this big demonstration.
Well, this has been a tremendous and informational conversation that we've been having. Is there any idea in particular you would like to leave the listener with before we call it close to the show?
Yes, I would encourage everybody who's listening to please visit our website, www.panis.org, and we're going to have our Peace Voter Guide up, which is a nonpartisan guide about how your representatives here in New York State have voted on issues important to the peace movement. And it gives you information on how to register to vote. I would just like to leave people with the idea that this is our democracy and we need to vote to participate in it. Whether candidates are disappointing or not, we need to be out there and speak our minds, cast our votes. That's our right, and we have some information available for you to look at if you want to see past voting records of people who are running. But I urge everybody to register and get out to vote. That would be the last thing I'd like to leave with.
Alicia, thank you so much for your time. This is Jerry Ashton with 15 Minutes of Fact, signing off and thanking the listener for being with us once again.